Okay, Holly, what's going on?
Well, we're just about ready to have an election. 2 weeks from now, we're going to be finding out what's going on in our country, in our state, and in this community. And everybody's on pins and needles about it.
I know that I have decided to vote early. Is this a trend that you think more Republicans are following now?
It seems like it. Over the weekend, I think there was record voting. And, you can't tell yet whether it's Democrats or Republicans, but just record counts voting, I think I had heard.
It's pretty unusual.
It is unusual, and I think people are just anxious. They're anxious. They want to get their vote in.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yep.
What else is going on? Any issues you want to talk about in the lead up here?
One of the things that I'm concerned about is this John West recall. That's just really disgusting. I think it's based on a lot of erroneous information, and it bothers me a great deal. It's just a lot of political maneuvering, and I wish it weren't happening in our community, but a lot of people fall for that kind of thing. And then they're trying to connect with John, anybody who John knows who might be running, so that drags in Chris Barnett, who's a great candidate. I mean, he's a public servant for many, many years. He's absolutely a great candidate.
It seems like some of the people who are regular contributors to social media on behalf of the recall are interesting characters, to say the least. Not the least of which is this John Oliver, the Grants Pass Tribune guy. And some of the stuff that he is doing is really kind of bizarre. Including text messages that he has sent to me right after I started doing my podcast. He contacted me trying to get me to believe that he had some sort of connection with the FBI and that he could arrange for me to meet his FBI contact and be filled in on all the behind-the-scenes investigations of all the corruption that was.
Take him up on it. Take him up on it. Make an appointment. See how fast that materializes.
That would be. I don't think at this point that's going to happen because John West was on with Bill Meyer yesterday morning and talked about some of this same stuff where this is apparently a favorite thing of his to feign association with the FBI, and that's supposed to elevate his credibility in my eyes, at least in this early contact that we have. And I'll insert the actual Facebook message where he's talking about this. It's kind of funny. It's what high school boys might say to one another to impress somebody, tell them some goofy lie in order to impress them with your status or something.
Well, he's a legend in his own mind. I think he's got a very small business, and he writes with a bunch of pseudonyms, as I understand it,
Right.
to pretend that there are a bunch of different articles being written about different subjects.
Yes, and the if you've ever seen his Facebook page, his profile picture says GPT on it, which I think is apropos because I think most of his stuff is written with the help of ChatGPT. This is the perfect example of what you can expect from John Oliver. John West's radio revelations: political maneuvering or genuine concern. The political landscape in Josephine County has recently been shaken by Commissioner John West's public airing of allegations concerning investigations that have been quietly pursued this year. I would ask, by whom? He's probably trying to suggest there.
I think he's talking about the investigation,
sheriff.
the bully, and all those kinds of things that the staff members are brought, all of which have ended up, he's been exonerated on every one.
Yeah, but I think that John West mentioned on the radio that John Oliver was somehow threatening to have the sheriff removed for misconduct.
I did hear that, yeah.
Anyway, he says West's decision to discuss these matters on a public radio show with host Bill Meyer instead of referring them to appropriate investigative bodies such as the Oregon Department of Justice or District Attorney has raised serious questions. Now, this is the modeling that he always uses, has raised serious questions. With who?
Well,
With who?
it's a passive statement because you're not identifying with whom.
Right. Yeah, and it's a way of suggesting that a large body of persons shares your opinion without actually saying
Right.
who they are. West's sudden decision to go public with these allegations has drawn widespread criticism. Is this you and your cat are talking about this, or what here? I don't get it.
He has an echo chamber of friends, and I'm sure they're bouncing around different ideas that suit their narrative.
That may well be, but I think he just writes specifically in this way to influence people that there's a lot of people with this opinion, come on board with us. If you read through really almost any of his articles, they all read like this. They all suggest that there is a shared opinion amongst many of this particular thing. And and he's really nakedly an advocate for the recall. And now, even so much more, but even back when I first started noticing his stuff, it's clearly, this is opinion journalism that is thinly disguised as, legitimate, objective journalism. And of course, you can't really say that, the Courier is a whole lot better, but I mean, this is really blatantly, he has a program that he can write an elaborate Facebook post into it. It looks like news, and then he can post it, and it gives an air of legitimacy that you wouldn't have if you were just throwing up Facebook posts.
Tired of the truth optional journalism in general, whether it's the Courier or whatever. And I think what happened with John West was very truth optional. They put something out there. Lily Morgan is a longtime enemy of John West. They just don't get along. And so she kind of drummed that up. A lot of people trust her. But it unraveled very quickly. When people started looking into the facts of that, it unraveled very quickly and continues to unravel. And yet she hasn't stood up and said, gee, I made a mistake or anything. She's just letting that go down the road. And I just find that kind of behavior despicable. It's not helpful to our community. John's doing a good job. He's doing exactly what he campaigned to do. Because we as a county have a huge problem. The timber industry went away. The funds are going away. So now we have fewer and fewer funds. With inflation and so forth, we have greater and greater costs. And what he's trying to do is get it all to balance. And in order to do that, we have, as an example, 450 staff members in the city, something like that. We can really afford to have about 250. So we've got to make some changes. And he's making those tough decisions. And it certainly makes people mad. It makes people over in the county uncomfortable that they may lose a job. But at some point, we've got to stop adding more and more people to the boat because the boat's going to sink.
Well, not only that, government has to be about the people that you're representing and their bottom line as well, and not just a small core group of people and their ultimate benefit.
Well, I think what happened with the progressives is they wanted to have the charter pass, and it failed miserably. 2-1 that went down. So when that happened, then all of a sudden that sort of changed the trajectory of things. Lily wasn't going to become the manager, which I think they were kind of hoping for. At least I've certainly heard from a number of people that was the game plan. So they start changing the plan. Now we're going to try this. Well, if we got rid of West, we could do this, we could do that. So they're moving all of the pieces around, trying to get things to go in a more progressive way. They say, that's just a bunch of hooey. But I've read it on some of the Democrat websites that their goal is to turn Southern Oregon blue. That is a main goal of theirs. So it's not just a conspiracy theory. It's an actual fact. And we're watching all kinds of movements take place in order to make that happen. And we, as a community, we're a more conservative community. We're looking at that and we're rejecting it. We're saying that's not what we want. That's not what we want. We've watched Portland and Salem and all of these other communities that went blue turn to complete peat moss, and we don't want that. So.
Well, I remember back in 2012, the funding shortfall was so great they didn't have any choice. They had to cut back a bunch of people, and they went from near the level that we are now down to 250. And I don't remember there being any great problem as just a member of the community from not having enough of these employees. And in many cases, when they want to pass tax levies or some new fee or tax, there are certain people who ask questions like, well, why can't you cut this or that or the other thing? And the county's default answer to that is we're already cut to the bone. So, and this is likely being said by people who fear that when the cuts happen, that it's going to get to them in some way. And government has to represent the people and not necessarily just the employees of the county. I have always wanted to get to the point where you find out where the bone actually is, where you can cut spending to the degree that, say, an Elon Musk would if he was buying Twitter,
Right.
and discovering who the productive employees were and who weren't the productive employees, and let's run a lean ship. But we rarely get to that point.
Well, and we need the new treasurer who's running, Mark DeYoung. He's running on transparency. And, it has been that they go into a meeting and they ask for some numbers, and the current treasurer won't provide the numbers. And that's very weird. Anybody who's a numbers person knows that they're responsible to leadership. That's their job, is to provide information, because they use those numbers to make important decisions.
And this has been going on for a while. So what's the stated reason for not providing the information?
I think she believes that it is her duty to hold on to that information. Her job, she's figured out, is to safeguard it, but she doesn't believe that she has to provide that information to them to make important decisions. She can hold that information back, and they're saying, what?
Well, that makes
as a
her the
leader,
arbiter of what's a good decision to do with the money.
Well, it makes no sense at all.
I mean, if
this
she's
is
not going to provide transparency to her boss, then that makes her the boss.
Right.
what I'm
It makes
saying.
no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I've been an owner of pretty good-sized businesses, and I would never tolerate that for 30 seconds. If somebody is our accountant and they won't give me the numbers, we have a serious problem, because you're constantly looking at the numbers to make the critical decisions that we have to make.
So then, not knowing what the reason is, the only thing left for people is to speculate about what your motives are. And, this...
It's just a hard no, unfortunately. I mean, she's probably a very nice person. She's been doing the job for a very long time. I don't know her, but I can just tell you that we have to run the county like a business. And when we start running it like a social club where you can decide whether you want to give information to your boss or not, we're going down the tubes. We need to absolutely demand it. And, the commissioners are elected officials. They're not the enemy. They're elected officials of the people. And when they ask for something, that is the same as you and I and everyone else saying this is what we want, because that is our representative handling the matters that we're asking them to handle.
Right.
So I wouldn't tolerate it, and I hope that they don't tolerate it.
So what's your speculation? I mean, I know that we don't have really polling available to know which way the wind is blowing here in Josephine County. What's your gut feeling on it?
for the different candidates that are running?
Yeah.
Well, I'm certainly hoping for the conservative candidates. I mean, the most conservative candidates for commissioner would be Chris Barnett and Ron Smith. I mean, they're both very talented and capable people. Certainly, Pat Fahey is much more to the left. He's trying very hard to act like he's more fiscally conservative and more conservative, but it's not ringing true. And I think Colleen Martin is a centrist, probably, leaning slightly left in the current environment. Colleen and Pat Fahey seem to be kind of running together. And he's well known to be much more liberal, so he kind of draws her more to the liberal side. And all of their signs are up with Harris Waltz and that kind of thing. So it certainly creates the look that she's much more liberal.
No question.
So there are a number of reasons. I mean, the Republican Party, when they decide to endorse someone, it's not just me saying I'm gonna endorse you. What has to happen is whoever wants to run comes to the Republican Party and says, I would like you to endorse me. Normally, if we're going to endorse somebody, it's somebody we already kind of know. It's not somebody who just walks in off the street and they expect you to drop everything and give them an endorsement. It doesn't really work that way. So most of the people who we endorse are people that we've known over a period of time, and we watched how they operate within the community, and it's not just them saying they're doing it. You watch how they do things. And so it was very easy for Ron Smith and Chris Barnett to be chosen by the party, and both of them were chosen unanimously.
So when you say chosen by the party, outline what that means.
What happens is, first of all, they come in and they want to be considered. What happens is we present them to then the PCPs. And hopefully they're people that the PCPs already know. That's the fastest route to getting endorsement by the party, is to be somebody who's in the community doing conservative things that people know, and that perhaps they've stepped into the office at the Republican Party before and offered their, to volunteer or donated or done something that has endeared them to the party. In the absence of that, they come in and they talk to the party members, and then there's a vote. It requires a 2/3 vote of the PCPs in a meeting in order to get across the line. And both of Ron Smith and Chris Barnett had unanimous votes, so it was way over 2/3. And I know that I'm sure that upsets Colleen Martin, it makes her feel bad, but that's just the fact.
So there's basically been an implication that there's corruption. The reason for the endorsements being the way that they are, excluding some, including others, is corruption on the part of the Republican Party. What's your response to that?
Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, any organization can choose who they endorse. And you can't, let's say it's the Catholic Church, and somebody comes in and they're Protestant, or at least they don't practice their faith, but they're asking the Catholic Church to endorse them. The Catholic Church may say no. That's not unethical in any way. Organizations endorse people that they know, whose behaviors they can anticipate, and who basically carry the water for what the party wants to accomplish. That's not unethical in any way. What our party wants to accomplish is we want to maintain a conservative society. We don't like that we have Pride Month and that kind of thing. You have Father's Day, Mother's Day, Veterans Day, Pride Month. We don't want things to get that out of balance. The other thing is we want our children to be treated like children. We don't want them to be having to deal with all these adult issues, sexuality, we don't want that in our community. We want conservative values. We want, if someone steals in this community, we want them to be prosecuted. We don't want people to be able to walk in the grocery store and walk out with bags of groceries, because who pays for that? You and I.
Right. So
we want conservative values. And we want bodily autonomy. We don't want a situation where somebody says, hey, we think there's a disease going around, therefore you're going to take this vaccination and you're going to wear a mask and you're going to stay home, and all of the things that happened through COVID. We review that and we reject that whole premise. We want people to make decisions on their own about how they want to handle their health matters, and not have the government dictating to us what we need to do. Those are conservative values. And that's how we choose our candidates. Who do we expect will follow conservative values? And that's how Chris Barnett and Ron Smith got picked, because we know how they operate. We've seen them through the years. The behaviors, what comes out of their mouth. You know, we know that Pat Fahey, as an example, was a person who was in favor of mask mandates. And he made a lot of statements even in the last forum that we had about, you know, people, you know, not hiring anybody who's not vaxxed, you know. That's a person who's just hasn't been doing any reading on the true value of vaccinations in this particular case. And, you know, with Colleen, who originally told me she wasn't running with him, and she said she hardly knew him, and they turn out to be, you know, white and rice, those things make people uncomfortable. Fact is. So we want candidates whose behaviors we can predict. And that's who we endorse. And if you want to say that that's unethical, I reject that wholeheartedly.
Well, I don't think the Democrats are apologizing for their endorsements.
Well, first of all, you know, we have people saying, well, here's an example. Colleen Martin said that she was endorsed by them, but she was never interviewed by them or anything else. But then she said she was not interviewed by the Republican Party, which I interviewed her personally for about an hour and a half. So I know that to be a misrecollection of some sort. She says it was just a calm, private discussion or whatever. I don't sit down with somebody for an hour and a half and shoot the breeze if I've never met him in my life. I always have questions that I'm asking him. I'm interviewing them. And in my business life, I've interviewed literally thousands of people, hired and fired thousands of people. That was an interview. I know the difference. So I really reject that she was never interviewed. And she was presented to the PCPs. The problem was that she wasn't presented as much as Chris Barnett was presented, because he started, you know, 9 months or so before.
And the votes
And
of
he's
the
well known.
PCPs are what made the decision about who to endorse.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. That's how it works. And
it makes sense.
when we vet people, we kind of look into their background. There's nothing wrong with Colleen's background per se. I mean, she's been in the Chamber of Commerce and that kind of thing. But he has a very multifaceted background of leadership that is what we want in our community to help run our county. You know, so we don't have to take years and years to vet someone. You can just look at what they've done in the past, what you know about them, and that helps you to decide who you want to endorse. And then there's a vote, and then you go forward.
So is it a departure in this election cycle to only endorse certain Republicans as opposed to giving tacit endorsement to all Republicans that are running? Is that a difference? Is that something different than?
We voted on it a couple years ago. We decided that that's how the Democrats operate. And we ended up with a lot of people in important positions in our county just for that reason, because we'd run a bunch of Republicans, the Democrats would run one person, they would get their person across the line because the other vote was split. And so we observed that, and we said, I think maybe we need to be heading in that direction. So now what our goal is to start early and to endorse candidates early so that we can immediately start working on marketing materials and strategies to get them across the line. Because just like the Democrats, we want our people in those offices. We want conservative candidates in those offices, and that's why we do it. So if there are two Republicans running, but one of them is not known to us and one of them is endorsed by us through the policy I just mentioned, certainly Republicans are going to want to vote for our endorsed candidate, and usually do. They legalize the drugs, but then they forgot all about the treatment programs. And that's our problem. We got 75% of the drug addicts, or the homeless people around here are drug addicts or addicted to alcohol.
Yeah.
And we don't have the state
That may
weighing
be
in.
a charitable number, actually.
I think it's more like 90 personally.
Yeah, right.
Just from personal observation. And they're right across the street from us, so it's not like we don't know what's going on.
Right.